and it's just making that equation work. So my first one, I needed like £90,000.
I'll just settle in a job that I don't want.
Well, I tried that as well. Yeah, it didn't work.
You couldn't even get a job you didn't want.
On a London property, it's like you would expect around £4,000 a month.
Thanks for checking out the podcast. This is From the Ground Up with Ahmed Khan. Well, Ahmed, thank you for joining me.
No, thanks for having me
on the podcast. It's great to have you here. I think I've seen a lot of your content over the past few months, and you kind of burst onto the property scene with a lot of value. The first time I noticed your content was like a 12-hour training video that you released in one video on YouTube.
Quite a few people have finished that, to be honest. I don't know how they've done it, but they've sort of sat through 11 hours.
I didn't make it all the way through, but to be fair, I was thinking good on anyone who managed to pull away all the way through that. But you've been in property for a long time.
Yep.
And I thought it'd be great to get you on the podcast just to talk about your experience, what you've done, find out a bit more about you, what you're doing at the moment, and really just work out how you've got to where you are. You're 28 years old. 2 years older than me. You've done a lot of stuff in property. You've been a property educator, trainer, you're a mentor. You do lots of things in property. But if you were to meet someone for the first time and say, what do you do? What do you tell them? How do you see yourself at the moment?
Yeah, to be honest, I normally just say I invest in properties. I don't really tend to delve much further than that. I think for the casual person who doesn't do much in property, right? You can't exactly say to them, oh, well, I do BRR in property. I mean, none of that would really make much sense. So I stick with, I invest in properties, and then if someone was to ask, what exactly do you do in properties? Currently, the main thing we do is buy houses, convert them into flats, and then rent those flats out. So, of course, that's not where I started. Started about 7 years ago after finishing university. At that stage, I was doing rent-to-rent. So renting properties, putting them onto Airbnb, Booking.com, and which is, I think, a great place to start for a lot of people, especially if you're just finishing university and maybe you have like £3,000 saved up or £4,000 saved up. You can't exactly buy anything. So at that point, I started in rent-to-rent, did just rent-to-rent for about 2.5 years. That gave me the money to buy the first one, which was a small 1-bedroom flat, which I turned into a 2-bedroom flat, refinanced, got some money back out, used that to buy the next one, and so on and so forth. And then did 5 of those, then bought a house to turn into 2 flats, then bought a house to turn into 4 flats, and now this one we're turning into 5 flats, the one we're in right now. And so, yeah, just trying to buy as many properties as possible and buying and holding. That's kind of how I would describe it in like the simplest of terms.
Yeah. We've just actually filmed a video in here, haven't we? Looking around the property, talking through the numbers. I completely forgot we were here, so I do think people might think it's a bit weird. We switched the cameras on and we're in like super dated.
It's in some old house.
In my grandma's house. But so this is one of your properties. If anyone's interested in checking that out, then make sure you head over to the video. I'll put a link in the description. But it's a really exciting project, this one. I think it's going to be. Is this your biggest one yet?
This is the biggest one. Yeah, I mean. The last one was 4 flats, so this is 1 more flat. But the last time it was 4 1-bedroom flats, and so this is 3 1-bedroom flats and 2 2-bedroom flats. So the biggest in terms of number of flats and the size and the numbers involved and everything else. And of course in terms of next from here, it would be, well, can I maybe buy a house and turn it into 9 flats? So that's kind of where I want to go with things. But this for now is the challenge I'm focused on, and so we'll see how this goes. Of course, nothing has happened yet. We're sort of right at the start. We should look to start works within a couple of weeks and then take it from there.
You wanted to do houses into apartments. What stops you doing office blocks into apartments? You can get more apartments out of a big office block, or doing commercial to resi, or run down apartments that need sprucing up. What is it in particular? Because you said that you're focused on houses into apartments. Why is that?
So this is kind of my take on this. I feel like in any business, you get paid for adding value, right? And I think in property, you get paid for spotting value. Like you make money when you can see something which someone else can't see. If you've got a 3-bedroom house, in your head, it might be a 6-bedroom HMO. For someone else, it might be a 3-bedroom house. The reason you're able to make money is because you're able to see something which someone else isn't seeing. I think that's generally true with a lot of property stuff, right? Now, in my opinion, the problem with commercial, and when I say problem, I don't mean like it doesn't work or anything. The reason, when I say problem, I mean the reason it's more challenging than something like houses into flats is because when you look at commercial, and let's say the property is 400 square meters, right? You know, I know, every man and his dog knows, well, 400 square meters, each flat has to be 40 square meters, that's 10 flats, right? And that is how those properties are generally valued. So I've looked at a lot of commercial stuff, but everyone kind of knows what the game is with commercial. So I feel like it's very hard to add value because the agent knows what's going to happen to it, the seller knows what's going to happen, you as a buyer knows what's going to happen. So I feel like that potential of adding value is very hard. Whereas I knew this guy years ago, and he started buying offices to turn into flats back in 2012. But in 2012, no one knew about permitted development rights.
Yeah.
And so when they were
popular now.
Now everyone knows, but no one knew. So he was buying buildings for 1 million and turning them into 20, 30, 40, 50 flats. But now that would never happen because every single person knows.
Everybody's driving the price.
Correct, because everyone knows what the potential is. So with this house, and you can relay some, add some footage or something. It's a 3-bedroom house on a big piece of land, right? Well, what is the potential here? Someone else might look at this and they might think, well, it's a 3-bedroom house. Maybe I can do a side extension and turn it into a 4-bed, or maybe I can turn it into a 5-bed. I looked at this from the point of view, what if I can turn this into 5 flats or 6 flats? It's not as easy to work out what the potential is in terms of adding value. And so if you can spot an opportunity which someone else doesn't see, you'll make money. And I feel like when you look at big houses, people don't really think about it that way. Because with this house, it's an awkward shaped house because it's sort of slanted to the side and there's a bungalow on the side, and it's not as clear cut in terms of, oh, well, I'll just do this and I'll turn into this many flats. You have to be a bit more creative. And I think with the bigger houses, you have that opportunity to find an opportunity which other people aren't seeing, and you can make money that way. It's the same thing with 1-beds into 2-beds. If you look at a 1-bedroom flat, a lot of people will see a 1-bedroom flat in bad condition and they'll say, well, what if I refurb it and now it'll be a nice 1-bedroom flat? But a lot of the times that doesn't really make that much money. I see a 1-bedroom flat, straight away I'm thinking, how do I turn this into a 2-bedroom flat? So that's the reason I'm not a huge fan of commercial, because everything I've looked at, it just feels like, oh, well, the seller wants 2 million because he knows you can get 12 flats out of this. There was one I looked at last year, and it was literally sold on the, when they sell you the property, they also give you the comparables.
Yeah.
And they give you the schedule in terms of, this is the building, we've already spoken to the agent, we think this is 8 flats, it's worth this much as a GDV, so therefore this is the price we want.
They sell it almost as a piece of land with planning.
Correct. Even though it doesn't have it.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas that never happens with stuff like this.
Because you've got to go out and get it.
Correct. You have to work out, well, what can I do with this? And if, for example, we both looked at this property and you said, well, hold on, maybe this can be 4 flats. And I looked at it and I thought, well, maybe this can be 6 flats. I can now pay more than you can because my profit margin is much, much higher. So I think there's more creativity involved, which allows you to build a margin. Whereas I don't think there is as much with commercial because everyone knows. Everyone knows exactly what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So not to say that it doesn't work, but I think it's just harder.
Yeah, no, I get that. And the competition, therefore, drives the price up to the point where, like you say, everybody knows what you can make. So therefore, it's just about who's going to offer the most. In the same way, if you're in the market to buy a 3-bedroom terraced house and your plan is to renovate it to a really nice 3-bedroom terraced house, if that's what everyone else is planning to do, it's basically who can do it for the cheapest, who's willing to make the least amount of profit, who's going to get the deal.
Correct.
That's how it works. So you said you did some rent-to-rent stuff, you did some serviced accommodation. Talk to me about, even before property, what's been your journey up until getting into property?
Yeah, so I went to UCL around the Euston area in London, did a 3-year degree in economics. My plan going into an economics degree was, anyone who goes to London to do economics, you pretty much get a job in finance. You get into accounting, consulting, investment banking, and that is pretty much the route. So my path was, my plan was exactly the same as everyone else. I was like, I'll go to uni, I'll do my 3 years, I'll get an investment banking job, make a good amount of money, and that'll basically be it. I applied for about 30 different internships and spring internships and summer internships and grad schemes, and I didn't convert a single one. I didn't even get a single one, let alone convert a single one. And so I think it was a case of, at that time, YouTube was becoming a bigger thing, and there was a lot more content around alternative ways of making a living, right?
Yeah.
Whereas before I went to uni in 2013, that wasn't really the case. I mean, you had Instagram and stuff, but you know how like passive income and all that sort of stuff is a big thing now. That wasn't the case in 2013. In 2013, everyone pretty much went into university thinking, well, I'm going to get a job.
Yeah.
Nowadays, everyone goes in thinking, well, what can I do on the side whilst I have a job? But that was never the case in 2013. So wasn't getting a job. And at the same time, there was a lot of that content around. And I thought, well, you know, I don't know, maybe I could do something else. And there was a lot of these courses flying around and these, you know, success resources events and all those sort of things. And I think, of course, you know, don't believe all of that sort of stuff. But I started thinking, you know, could I do something else rather than just get a job? And so I kind of said, well, okay, I'll stop applying for jobs when I finish university, and I'll give this, I don't know, 12 months. Like if something comes out of it in 12 months, then great. And if it doesn't come out of it in 12 months, I can just start applying for jobs again. I was living at home anyway, so it's not like it was costing me any money. So I finished university, and I thought, well, okay, I didn't care about building a portfolio at that stage because, you know, you don't need a portfolio when you're just trying to make some money, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, what is like the easiest thing which requires the least amount of money just to kind of like get going here, kind of thing. And that's how I stumbled upon Rent to Rent, because it felt like, well, hold on a sec, you don't need that much money, and if I've got a couple of properties and I can make, I don't know, £2,000 a month, £1,500 a month, well, that's an income. And that will buy me enough time to sort of figure things out in terms of what do I want to do next. And that'll buy me a bit more time in terms of figuring out what do I do after that, and so on and so forth. So yeah, no, my plan was that the traditional corporate stuff, it didn't pan out. Funnily enough, actually, in my last year, I had an interview with Deloitte, and I had a assessment center with Deloitte. And if I had got that job, I truly believe I would not be doing any of this right now.
Yeah.
Because if I got that job, I would be like, sort all of this nonsense.
I was gonna ask you about that.
I would never do
say, I bet you're pretty glad that those 30 job offers.
Yeah, you know, because the reality is, if I had a graduate scheme lined up,
you'd have been comfortable in your lane.
Yeah, because I would have been like, okay, well, maybe I would have been like, okay, I'll take the graduate job thing and I'll do this on the side. And doing something on the side is so hard, not because of a time constraint, but because of the mental challenge of, well, I'm making money here, and what if this doesn't work out? I'm spending all my, you know, weekends doing this thing which might not work out. Like, you don't have enough of, I don't know, for the lack of a better word, like a why kind of thing. It's because you're like, well, I'm doing fine in my job. It's like, I don't necessarily need this. But when you go all in, it's like you have to make it work, because otherwise you're like, well, the alternative is now getting a job. Yeah. So I didn't get the Deloitte job. But if I did, I swear I would be at Deloitte right now, because I would be like, I'm getting paid, you know?
Yeah, and that's it. And I think there's a lot to be said about kind of going all in. I'm reluctant to say it. When people ask me, you know, what should I do? I'm in a job I hate and I want to do property. I never really want to say quit your job, because you don't want to be that guy, and then if it all goes wrong, then it's all on you. So, but I did a similar thing where I started deal packaging, and I remember I
and you got a job?
Yes, I was alongside a job. Right. I have bought a house, renovated it, sold it, made some profit. Right. Did it again. Just kind of was doing that on the side. With flips, you kind of can do. But then I had to go down to 4 days a week and then 3 days a week, because I couldn't do full-time job and that. And then I started deal packaging, and when I sold my first deal, I was like, I could make so much more money doing this than. So what would happen if I went in full-time and did it? You know, if I could find a deal once a month and make £5,000 on the side, what happens if I quit my job and just went all in on that? How much could I make? And that's what pushed me to quit my job. But it's so hard.
You've done it the right way, though, which is you haven't gone from one to the other in a very, like you've transitioned slowly. Yeah. You had the job, and then you built up the other thing. Now the other thing is working, and you've kind of made the switch. That is the way to do it, and that's what I say to everyone as well. Because, you know, people say all the time that I want to build a portfolio. Shall I just quit my job? And I'm like, well, the reality is,
you need to
a lot of the times, in order to get a mortgage, you need an income. Unless you have a really big deposit, and sometimes you can get away with it. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily need an income to buy a property, but it does help if you have an income in order to buy a property. Not always. I mean, there are lenders out there who will give you give you some sort of give you a mortgage. But even if you got a mortgage, now your income goes from 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 a month to like nil.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you sustain?
£100.
So your solution actually is the right solution. It's just, the problem is that solution for someone like me wouldn't really work, purely because my personality type is I find it very hard to do two things. Like, I find it impossible to do two things at the same time. Whereas I think I'm good at focusing on one singular thing. But when I have to, I don't know what that period was like for you, in the sense that you have a job and you're doing this thing on the weekends, and you're sort of balancing focus and like mental energy kind of thing. I genuinely don't think I would be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your take is on that.
So it was during COVID when I was able to leave my job. So I was in a job where I pretty much just started it, and on the first day I go into the big team meeting, and the guy running the organisation said, "Well, everyone, get all your stuff from your desks. We're all going to start working from home because we're going into a lockdown." And I was like, I haven't even got a desk. It's literally my first day, first meeting, and I got told I was working from home. And so the job that I had really essentially never even got started. So I was getting paid. Right. And I never really had a whole lot to do. So there was lots of free time, space, capacity mentally to be able to do this stuff on the side. And so I think I was able to do it that way. I also had a joint venture partner where we flipped a house earlier on. So he was able to take a lot of the weight. So I think in terms of mental capacity, I was never at a major strain trying to start a business. But then as soon as I got that proof of concept of, I found a deal, someone was willing to pay me thousands of pounds for it, this can work, I quit my job. That was it. I didn't really get it up and running. I just had proof of concept, and then I went for it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think having said that, at the same time, if I, let's say, did have a 9-to-5 job, and I was like, I really want to do this, I probably would have found a solution to make it work somehow.
Yeah.
The problem is, because I've actually never had a job, so I've like never experienced work life, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, to me, in my head, I always think, well, I wouldn't be able to do it because I've never actually had a job, so I don't really know how that would work. But at the same time, I suppose it is one of those things that if you want to do it bad enough, then you'll find the weekends and everything else.
Well, that's the thing. I for a good long time, I was working every single day. I was working. I ended up giving up my Fridays. I went down to 4 days and was working Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays.
On the business.
On the business.
Right.
And all my evenings.
Right.
My wife at the time, she's still my wife, but
at
the time, my wife was, she was amazing. She was so supportive, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without that level of support. But yeah, man, it consumed everything for a long time until I was able to quit and keep it within almost reasonable work hours. But I'm interested because a lot of people would have, in your position, you applied for 30 jobs, didn't get any of them. A lot of people would just go, do you know what? Rather than going for the job that I want, I'll just settle in a job that I don't want.
I tried that as well.
Yeah?
Yeah, it didn't work.
You couldn't even get a job you didn't want.
I went to university thinking
this is the answer to all my problems.
I'm not going to say like different roles because I don't want to make it sound like one role is better than the other. But I went in thinking this is what I want to do, and then I didn't get that one, so I was like, well, maybe this isn't that bad. And then I applied for that one. I didn't get that entire criteria. And then I was like, well, it's quite challenging. Then maybe I'll go for the next one.
Yeah.
I went like 5 layers lower than what I initially wanted to do.
You couldn't even get the job.
I had an interview with, I kid you not, it was so bad. I had an interview with, I can't remember if it was like Unilever or something. I can't remember what the company was.
Yeah.
And it was a video interview, and the lady asked me a question, and I didn't know the answer, and I kind of like tried to like waffle my way out of it. But in my head, I was like, I failed this. I was like, I've got no idea what's going on. And then 2 minutes later, she asked me another question. This time, I had no idea, and I was so like defeated by this point because I'd done so many interviews. I was literally like, I have no idea. And she was like really encouraging. She was like, no, try it. I was like, I swear, I actually have no idea.
You can say try all you want.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah, literally. I was literally.
I hate moments like that.
I was literally like,
man.
I actually can't be asked anymore.
Yeah.
I literally, because I'd done so many interviews. I'd done so many like assessment centers and phone interviews and like video
yeah.
interviews.
I bet at
And
that point you're just like,
I had an assessment
Just
center
tell
for
me I've
like
not got a
Deloitte,
job.
for IBM. I had like literally, yeah, assessment center was like normally the last stage I would get to, but I would done like, you know, those like maths exams and like those general, whatever those question
Yeah.
exams were. And literally this is probably the lowest point where I was like, I don't know. Because you know, in an interview, you still try.
Yeah, you
like
still
you
wanna
just
like
make
blag
some
it.
shit up. Like,
Yeah.
like or like you twist the question and you kind of like answer a different question.
Yeah.
Which I literally was like, I don't know. I'll say I can't be asked anymore. This shit's too hard.
So
Couldn't do it.
Okay, so you couldn't get the job that you wanted out of uni. You couldn't get the job that you didn't want out of uni.
Yeah.
So in the end, you went into rent to rent. Talk to me about that kind of. How did you learn about it? What did you do? What does a rent to rent deal look like for you?
Yeah. So I think generally it's split between rent-to-rent HMO and a rent-to-rent service accommodation, which just means a rent-to-rent Airbnb, right? So what happened was, you know, when you're starting out in property and there's so many options and everything seems easy, and then you sort of delve a bit deeper and you realize, well, this is actually much harder than it actually is. So I did that for a good few months, and then what happened was I found someone at an event who was doing rent-to-rent service accommodation in London, and so I said to them, I'll just work for you for free, and well, not for free, but for like commission. So I'll help with like property viewings, and I'll help like find investors and those sort of
And
things.
you got that job.
And yeah, well, if it was a job, yeah. So the person was like, yeah, fine, you know, like tag along, and if you can help, then we'll make something work. And it's not like I wanted to do rent-to-rent SA. It was more so I was like, I just need to do something, because right now I'm just jumping between different things, and everything is just way too confusing and way too hard. Whereas in my head, I was like, if I could just get some experience, at least it will give me some sort of like guidance in terms of, well, maybe this is how you do this, or this is how you do that. If that person on stage at that day was doing rent-to-rent HMO, I probably would have done rent-to-rent HMO. You know, it's that was the first.
Tell me what to do, I'll just do
Correct.
it.
Yeah. That was the first opportunity I had, and that person was making good money out of it at the time, and so I tagged along. I helped with like viewings and investors and those sort of things. Did about, I think, 5, 6, 7 deals with that person. And by the end of it, I was like, well, I kind of know how this works now. I've got some credibility because I can put my name to a bunch of projects. And then I took my first flat in Stevenage, where we are today. So it was a studio flat, £725 per month in the town centre. Again, you know, when you're starting out, you do your research and you're like, well, this should work. But at the same time, you kind of are shitting it that.
Well, if it actually just doesn't.
What if no one ever books?
Yeah.
And so I rented the cheapest property I could find in Stevenage, because in my head I was like, yeah, like mathematically it should work, but like if it doesn't work, at least I'm only losing 700 quid a month as opposed to 1,400 quid a month. So I rented a studio flat, and I think on the first day it didn't have like any bookings or something, and by day 2 someone booked for 3 nights on Airbnb, and then someone booked for 4 nights, and then one day someone booked for like the entire month, and you know that kind of gave me the confidence that, well, actually people are doing this and this is actually working. Saved up the money from that one, rented a 1-bedroom flat in the same building. Saved up the money from that one, rented another 1-bedroom flat in the same building, rented 2 more 2-bedrooms in the same building, and it kind of trickled. But I think when you're starting out, the first one isn't even about making the most money. It's just about making any money. You know, there is one thing reading about it and one thing seeing other people do it, but until you have like done it yourself, it doesn't feel real, because it feels like, well, yeah, it was good for him, and like maybe in that area it's okay, or you know, with that property it's okay. But until you actually do it for real, you don't quite believe it.
Yeah.
So that was the first one for me. A tiny studio flat, and probably twice the size of this room that we're in right now. Bed, sofa, tiny kitchenette, tiny bathroom with a shower and stuff. And that kind of started making some money, which then spiraled onto the next one, onto the next one, onto the next one.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. Don't forget, we help people who are looking to seriously build their property portfolios, do it in a hands-free and efficient way. So if you're interested in building a portfolio and you've got the capital ready to go, then make sure you get in touch with me. The link will be in the description.
But like I said, I would have done anything
Yeah.
at that moment in time.
Yeah, and
I wasn't-
how much would they typically make you a flat like that? Or
anywhere from like, let's say £500 to £1,000 a month on average.
Okay.
So that studio flat, I remember one month it made £2,200 in 1 month, because we just had a crazy booking in there. Now, that is definitely on the top end of it, but there might be other months where it's making £400 a month. So when you average it across the year, it would be between 500 to 1,000, around the 750 mark.
Yeah.
Which is great if you can make that work.
Yeah, definitely. I think doing what you did, offering to work for somebody for free and help out and jump along into their deals, is a really good thing that I recommend people to do all the time. Because my first deal, I tried loads of different things, wasn't too sure, a bit nervous. And then a guy who was kind of mentoring me at the time just said, look, I've got, why don't you buy a house? Just buy something, you buy it, I'll pay for the refurb, I'll do the refurb, I'll help you sell it, and we'll split the profit. So basically a joint venture. And the thing that I was dead nervous about was, everyone tells you, like, you get your solicitors, you do this, you sign these contracts, and here's what searches are, and then when you get your builder in, your first fix, and all these different like things that you hear and you go, yeah. But until you actually do it, it just didn't like cement in my mind of like, this is actually really doable. And it was doing that joint venture where I felt like, do you know what, I've gone through the process. I haven't done all of it myself, but I've seen a lot of it, in the same way that you were doing the deals with that person that you were
It just
kind of
makes
volunteering
it
with.
real.
Makes it real.
Yeah.
Makes you feel like it's possible. And it was then when I went on to do my next flip completely by myself that I was like, yeah, this is actually totally doable.
Yeah.
And I can imagine doing all those deals with that person you were working with, and then but then going from that to doing your own deal, it's almost like the perfect two steps. Work with somebody else who knows what they're doing, then just do one by yourself, and you learn so much more than you can from just sitting in networking events or seminars.
I was speaking at an event last night in Bournemouth, and there was a bunch of young people, and they were like, well, how do I start? And I've got no experience and I've got no money. At the end of the day, you need one of the two. You either need money or you need experience, because if you have no money and no experience, there's nothing you can bring to the table.
Yeah.
If you got money, it's easy because, well, okay, I'm putting up the money. You just find someone like yourself who has the experience. You merge and, job done. Normally the hard part is people don't have the money, okay? So therefore you need to have experience. And I say experience and not knowledge, because the problem with knowledge is anyone can go on a course and be like, well, yeah, I know exactly how this works, but
I've had people come to me and say, invest in me, I'll do some deals. You put the money in, and don't worry, I'll do it. I've not done anything yet, but I've been to this course.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah,
it's not experience.
Exactly. Whereas if you work for someone for free, now you have something you can put your name to and say, well, I've actually done it for real, as opposed to I've just been on a 2-day course. So if someone wants to go on a course, that's fine, but then they should take that course and actually apply it in the real world, whether it's using their own money or someone else's money, or just working for someone for free, or doing a joint venture like yourself, because you need experience. Yeah. So when I was working with that person, in the back of my head, I was thinking, well, if I can get a few done with this person, when I do my own, I'd raise money for my first rent-to-rent deal, because in my head I was like, well, I now have credibility because I've done something. Like I had been involved in real things. I haven't just been on a 2-day course, and now I'm saying to people, well, I know exactly how this works because I've done the course in that location and that location. So I think the way you've done it or the way I've done it is, to your point, it's the good 2-step system, which is get some experience and then raise money, as opposed to just jump in and start raising money. Because I know there's so much content nowadays that you can just use other people's money and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, why would I give you money if you haven't done it before? Yeah. It's challenging. It's very hard.
But once you have done it, it's actually relatively easier than you think to raise money.
And I know people who have raised money, so it's not like you can't. It's practically impossible, but it's just harder. The easier you can make it for yourself, the better. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you started with rent-to-rents. How many of those did you end up getting?
I did because partway I started doing management as well. So what I was doing was, I wasn't just doing rent-to-rent. I had about, what's that?
Like a lettings agency.
Yeah, so people would give me their SA properties and they would say, can you manage it for me? So essentially what I was doing was I was Airbnb-ing other people's properties. So including my rents and the management ones, at one point we had about 42. But the big bulk of that was management, because there was a person who had 10 in Maida Vale and a person had 3 in Greenwich. And so scaling that was far easier, right? Because they put up all the money, they put all the furniture in place, they pay for all the pictures. All you have to do is the operational side of it. Just list it on the portals and the systems and the management and the processes. So it got to like 40 relatively quickly, purely because people had 10, 3, 4. Now that also came with a lot of challenges as well. So it's not as simple as that, because if someone took a bad rent-to-rent deal and they gave it to you and it made no money, then they would be like, well, this isn't making any money. But I'm like, well, yeah, but you've given me something which is like, there's only so much I can do. It's like, you know, for example, there could be a property which is getting good occupancy and it's making a good 90 at a good rate. It might still not be profitable if they've taken something where the rent is way too high.
Yeah.
So it had its challenges at the same time. It was a good business model because as a person managing, you would make money regardless.
What was your fee typically?
It was about 15%.
15%, but you'd still have to still get the revenue in.
Yeah, so 15% of revenue. Yeah.
Okay, so 15% of revenue. That's quite good considering that you'd typically be looking at what for revenue.
Well, let's say
really like, you know,
on a London property, it's like you would expect around minimum like around £4,000 a month. So 15% would be about £600 a property, which is really good.
It's basically rent.
Yeah.
It's more than rental profit for a lot of people.
It's honestly like for a lot of people who are just starting out, and if they can get onto that, if you don't have a lot of money, it's great.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people want to do service accommodation, but it comes with hassle, and so they just want someone else to take care of all the hassle. And so if you can make £500 a month, £400, £600 a month for managing a property and putting no money up, it's great.
Where you just replicate processes and systems from one to another.
So for most of the properties, it was great, but every now and then you would get something where the person hadn't taken the best deal in the world, and you know, it came with its challenges. The other challenge was that it's one of those things that I probably should have been stricter in terms of my contracts. So what would happen is I would have a property, and if there was a maintenance issue, I would say to the person, listen, there's a maintenance issue, you know, you need to get this fixed. But they wouldn't get the issue fixed, and now what was happening was you're getting bad reviews because the issues aren't being fixed. But it's not just bad reviews on that property, you're getting bad reviews on your account overall. Everything starts to get affected. So, you know, it does come with its challenges at the same time, but it's a great model for, you know, to make a lot of money, as long as the problem was, because the people who were giving me properties, I had known them for a while and I'd met them at networking events and everything else. So I wasn't going to be like, if you don't do this, I'm going to, you know, there's going to be a penalty. You know, it was like, I wasn't going to be that guy. Whereas the bigger management agencies, they are those guys, right? Which is like, you have 2 days to fix this. Otherwise, we're sending our person in. They're going to fix it. They're going to charge whatever they charge. So if you fix those few issues, honestly, it's a great model.
Yeah. So you had 40 plus units. Do you still run that now, that business?
No, not as much. Purely because 2018 December is when I bought my first property. That was a 1-bedroom, which I turned into a 2-bedroom. And so my plan was, I only did rent-to-rent because I wanted to move into buying properties. I didn't do rent-to-rent because I was like, I want to do rent-to-rent for the rest of my life. So I decided in December 2018, I'm not going to take on any more properties. I'm just going to keep the ones I have. But keep in mind, this is December of 18. And then we all know what happened March of 2020. So funnily enough, I was speaking at a property event. I think it was like 4th of March 2020. And someone asked me from the audience, like, are you concerned about COVID? And I was like, I said, no. I was like, I don't know. It's not even a thing. Like, isn't it something in China or something? Because you remember, it wasn't really a thing. And it kind of became
there was talk about it. But you were seeing like hospitals being built really quickly in China in December.
But in China, but not in this country.
And then it was kind of like March time, towards the back end of March, wasn't it? That it kind of kicked in.
And at the start of March, it was still like, oh yeah, there's this COVID thing, and should we be concerned? Should we not be concerned? And it was like, I think it was like mid-March when suddenly everyone decided, hold on a second, like, we're staying at home. Yeah. Like it was a very quick flip. It wasn't like,
it was fast.
It wasn't some long government warning that, by the way, this thing might happen. It was a very quick turnaround in terms of, that says suddenly everything gets shut off. So I did that event 4th of March, and I remember like 10th of March or something. It was like on Airbnb and Booking.com. It was like cancelled. So it was like a really strange period where some properties were still fine because some people still needed accommodation, and some were like making no money, and then the others were making money, and the other ones were now not making any money. It was a weird time because.
And we were also in lockdown, then out of lockdown,
correct,
then
yeah.
in lockdown.
It was a funny period. And so on like loads of properties, like 10, 15 properties, I had renewals coming up. And so I was like, hold on a sec. Like initially when COVID started, I think everyone thought, hold on, this is like a 2-month thing. And by the end of 2 months, like, by like June or something, well, it's like back to normal. My renewals came up around June time. And I think by that point, everyone sort of realized, hold on a sec, like this is not a 2-month thing anymore. Like this could go on for a while. And so at that point, it didn't really make much sense to renew contracts for another year, knowing sometimes there's a lockdown, sometimes there isn't a lockdown. Now you're on a red list, now you're not on a red list. And so I slowly started giving those properties back, because why would I take the risk on so many properties in case there is another lockdown, if that makes sense. So I gave a lot of those back. I kept some, and so I still have some, but like very few. My main focus now is on the development side of things as opposed to the rent-to-rent.
Yeah. Okay. So you got your first rent-to-rent in what year?
I got my first rent-to-rent, the one I got myself, not working with the other person. That was 3rd of January 2017.
Okay, 3rd of January 2017. So you were doing that for a good 3 years?
Oh yeah. I mean, like I said, I still have some now, but in terms of doing just rent-to-rent till December of 18, so 2 years, right? 2 full years. And like I said, I still had all of those, and I really started offloading when COVID started.
Yeah.
So 3 years of a lot of rent-to-rent, and then this phasing out session of, well, now I want to turn a house into 2 flats, 4 flats, 5 flats. And so I had a bit of a transition, and that's actually what I recommend to everyone, that if you're starting out, do rent-to-rent, but do it with the intention of, maybe I'll do 2, 3, 4, I'll make £3,000 a month, £4,000 a month, and then use that experience and credibility to start doing, the bigger stuff. Whether it's you own a property in the USA, you own a property to do HMO, you turn a house into flats. Because the benefit of rent-to-rent is it doesn't take much money and you make a lot of cash flow. The downside of rent-to-rent is you don't own the property, so there's no appreciation. And at the same time, you have much less control. So for whatever reason, if the landlord one day wants the property back, because I don't know, maybe they want to sell it, maybe they want to move in themselves, whatever the reason is, it's like you don't control.
There's only so much you can do.
There's only so much you can do, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. If you're starting out and you have nothing else to do and you can't afford to do anything else, it's definitely a good way of starting out.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think what happens is, even though it's a rent-to-rent deal, because it's still a property deal and you still get a feel of how property works, when you then go into buying stuff, I know buying is completely different, but mentally you're still like, well, I do property and I kind of have property context and I know how it works, and when it comes to raising money, people from the outside are like, well, that person does property, so I can trust him with property-related stuff. So even though it's rent-to-rent, which has nothing to do with buying, it just puts you in that space where you're like, well, actually, I do know how property works and it's not the hardest thing in the world. Whereas when you haven't done anything, doing the first one, whether it's rent-to-rent or buying a property, is so flipping hard.
Yeah. So you went from doing rent-to-rents into buying your own. That was always the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, 40 units of rent-to-rent essays, £600 per unit. Did you see a big hit in your monthly revenue?
You mean going from the rent-to-rent stuff?
When you started to taper off the rent-to-rents and you started to increase the amount of actually buying and holding your own assets. Was there a big kind of drop at any point, or did you really gradually phase it out as you started to increase?
The only big dip would have been around the COVID time.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's not like I stopped doing rent-to-rent, and I still have some rent-to-rents now, obviously nowhere near as much as I had back then. But first 3 years, I still had the rent-to-rent properties, and then COVID happened, and even then, it wasn't like they all stopped making money. It's like some of them were actually doing really well because there were these contractors from India and stuff who had to stay there because of project work, and those properties made a killing. But then there were other properties which made nothing. So it was like a gradual transition. It wasn't like it's sort of like falling off a cliff here, because I started buying properties in December of 18 anyway, and I bought 5 one-beds in the next 16 months. So it was like I was doing rent to rent, then I was suddenly buying a lot of those, and I had 5 rent. By the time COVID started, I already had bought 5 properties, because I bought my 5th one March of 2020, basically when COVID started. And then I did a house into 2 flats also in COVID. Then I did a house into 4 flats towards the tail end of COVID. So, it wasn't, I got a bit lucky that I started the process of buying properties very early in like December, in like 2018. Whereas if I had done that much later on, now I would have lost the rent-to-rent deals, plus I've got no other properties, whereas that didn't really happen.
So how many properties do you own? How many flats? Let's talk about flats then, individual units. How many do you own at the moment?
So right now, own 11, and then once this house is turned into 5 flats, that's 5 more, so that'll be 16.
Yeah.
But right now, I am in the process of selling one of them in order to put more money into this one once I refinance. So that is going through legals right now. So by the time this is done, that one will be sold. So take that off. So that will leave 15.
So you went from, I'm trying to map this out for somebody who maybe is in your position. Maybe they've just finished uni, maybe they're still doing uni, maybe they never went to uni at all, and they're thinking, I don't want to get a job, I want to get into property, got no money, got no experience. Obviously, it sounds to me like step number 1 is get the experience, work with other people, joint venture with other people, or just shadow someone where possible. Then start maybe a rent-to-rent business. If we're following your same path, start a rent-to-rent business, build up a huge amount of cash flow. How did you take the jump from rent-to-rent into buying your own property? Because you had no money, I'm assuming.
Well, I had money from my rent-to-rent stuff at that point.
So you were making you made a significant amount on your rent-to-rent.
Yeah, because I had
to enable you to buy 5.
No,
flats.
not 5. That enabled me to buy like a couple.
Yeah.
But what was happening was, I was buying, for example, my first one I bought for 237 in Battersea Park. I refinanced that for £320,000, and in the end, my money left in was £31,000. So I put in like 80, 90 or something in that deal, and I got 60 back. Yeah. So now I had 60, plus I had some more rent-to-rent money, which I then used to dump into the next one.
Yeah.
So I was recycling as much as possible. But then at the same time,
the amount that you lost, the difference was made.
I was making up the difference. It's not like I had so much money that I could buy 5.
Yeah.
I had to keep recycling. And then at the same time, I had investors who would leave money in for a long time at the same time. So I was using their money to buy, repaying them with the cash flow. So it was my own money as the initial source, refinancing as much money as possible, then using investors to then buy and slowly repay them over time with cash flow and those sort of things. And so that's how I did it, as opposed to save up so much. I mean, to buy 5 in London, you would need a lot of money saved up.
I was going to say that.
You would need like £500,000 saved up or something. Yeah. So I did not have £500,000 saved up by any means.
Okay. So then you've gone from rent to rent, you buy your first property, you add value, you then get a mortgage on that property or a new mortgage, you refinance it, pull as much you can out of it. With your business over here, your rent-to-rent business, you're kind of topping it up. Plus, you're bringing investor financing because you've got the experience, you've got the knowledge of property, so you're able to, with the credibility you've got, load on more debt. So you're basically just pulling in funds from everywhere now, and then you're buying the next one, refinancing it, more debt from investors, more cash from the cash flow from your property business. Is that kind of how it works? And there's just been almost a balance and a blend as you've grown from there?
The thing is, like, I think you'll know this with property. It's never like, it's such a chicken and egg problem that you're trying to find the money and you're trying to find the property. It's so hard to draw like a very neat plan in terms of, well, I'm going to get this much money, then I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Because it never quite lines up, right? Like you might raise £50,000, but then suddenly the deal you get maybe needs 70, and now you're like, hold on, shit, I'm 20 short. Yeah. It's so hard to forecast that this is how exactly I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to raise £40,000 and I'm going to buy something for £150,000. It never quite maps that way. So it's always like, you need a deal and you need to find a way of raising money or getting money somehow. and it's just making that equation work. So my first one, I needed like £90,000, and then I wasn't like, I knew I was going to refinance, but I didn't know exactly how much I was going to get back out of it, because you never know the exact end value. So it's very hard to then forecast, well, okay, if I then take 20,000 from here and I use the refinance money, then I can buy this one. You just have to go one project at a time, because you're never 100% certain exactly how it's going to play out and who the investors are going to be at that moment in time, and so on and so forth. So my advice to people normally is just focus on getting the first one done. And in terms of the roadmap, actually, I was thinking about this, because people keep asking me, like, what's the best way of starting out if I was, if I'm just out of university or if I'm in university. So I think we can both agree that you need experience, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is, people say to me all the time, oh, can I come and shadow you? The problem is, one, there isn't that much to do, because it's like, what would they shadow? Like right now we're in this property, it's like, there's nothing for me to do. The builder's going to do what they do, right? It's like, plus it's like, if they come and shadow me, for me, it's more work now, because now there's someone...
It's more hassle, because you'd rather just crack on and get the work done.
Correct. It's more hassle, so there's
It's
nothing...
also surprising, because I get people asking me the same thing, can I come and work for you for free?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's really kind, and I know you want to learn and stuff. But honestly, it's astounding how often I'm just sat at a computer.
Yeah.
That's all.
Correct. It's so hard, but I do think there is an angle. I think what people should do is, so now you need experience, and you need to add value to the other person, because if it's hassle for me, I'm not going to do it, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I think what people should do is they should find property people like yourself, maybe me, maybe like other people as well, and help them with maybe like their social media or something. Say, I'll stick around, I'll do all of that stuff for free, because they'll be learning in the process anyway. Plus they can then come on site and they can do all that sort of stuff, which gives them credibility and experience, real hands-on experience. Because if I'm doing a 12-month project and someone said, I will come once a week and I will film this stuff for you, and by the end I will make this video, I would happily have someone come around, right? But if someone says, oh, I want to come once a week just so you can show me around, that's more work from me now.
Yeah.
This way they've got experience, they've got credibility, they've got connections, they're adding value to you or me or whoever this developer is, and it's a win-win for everyone.
The idea of someone coming and kind of sitting here whilst I'm getting on with work and they're just kind of shadowing me, I just think, oh, that's not what I want. But if someone came and offered value...
Because you'd do that.
Yeah.
If someone said, like, I'll come to your flip once a week, you show me around, we'll make a video out of it. Yeah. So I'll show someone around. Yeah. No problem.
Or if it was like, it's about maximizing the value. So if I was going to start again, I'm thinking about what I would appreciate, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't need someone to come and shadow me all week, even once a week. I don't need that. If someone said to me, could I jump on a Zoom call with you for an hour, talk me through exactly what you need me to find in terms of property deals, I will then put into action everything you said, go and find the deals, and then report back, and in like a month's time. I would prefer that in terms, because it's the ongoing week in, week out, I don't have time for. But if someone came to me and genuinely was like, I'm going to take 10 minutes of your time now to show you a few deals that I've done once a month, I'd be up for that. Yeah,
the problem is sometimes it's very hard to explain exactly what you want, and the experience and the knowledge.
And if the quality of the deals are pretty bad.
It becomes hard. Yeah. I actually, once I needed help with something, and there was this person who was an experienced developer, and I wanted to learn from them, but in my head I knew I needed to add some sort of value, because otherwise, it's not that, it's not like they're not a nice person. It's just everyone's busy. Like everyone got their own stuff going on. So I pitched them that, listen, you help me with this and I will help you systemize everything. So like whatever your deal analysis system is, I can help you automate that, or I can help you, like make better spreadsheets and those sort of things.
And this is what you did with the guy that you shadowed?
Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah. So because I knew, they had, everything was like paper files and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, listen, I can help you electronically, like do all that sort of stuff. Now that wouldn't add value to me because I can do that myself.
Yeah.
And you can probably do that yourself as well. But if someone's older, 50s, 60s, they would really value someone who can come and sort everything out, plus they're learning at the same time. But honestly, genuinely thinking about it, I think, because so many people have asked me like how I will come and do something. If someone pitched me that they can come like help me with social media stuff, I'd be down for that.
If anybody's
Because
watching,
because it's like they would learn at the same time. I would get value out of it, and now they have experience and credibility and all those sort of things, which they can now say, well, I've been, and I don't mind them saying, well, I've been involved in X, Y, and Z, if they genuinely have been around and they've sort of seen the process.
Do you know what? It's a good point, and I take back the whole deal thing. I regret saying it. I wish I never said it.
Which deal thing?
The thing I said about like if someone came to me and said I'll find deals for you.
Yeah.
Because the reality is,
it's hard.
Reflecting on it, I get people sending me deals all the time.
Yeah,
they go, look at this, and it's like, what is it?
Yeah.
It's a Rightmove link. Okay, cool. What have you agreed it at?
Because
I haven't agreed it yet.
The education gap is so big.
Yeah, it's just like it's too big. This like you'd be better off just going away, learning something, doing it yourself, and then coming to me.
Yeah.
Because if you come to me and say I will help you find deals, what that actually equates to is I will have to teach you how to find deals, and that's not easy.
And then the other thing is you're relying on their motivation for them to like continue and do it.
Yeah, so what if they just don't?
I'm always worried that if I spend 3 hours explaining something, and then they go, oh, well, I haven't found anything, and this is too long now, I can't be asked.
Yeah.
Now I've just burned 3 hours trying to explain something which I've got nothing for. But social media, I'd do it.
Yeah. It's a good idea.
We need to find a way of putting that into place, like we need to have like loads of people like helping with some social media thing. I don't know what that looks like.
If for whatever reason we come up with a fantastic idea, I'll put it in the description of this video. If you haven't thought of anything, there'll be nothing in the description.
Yeah. If we think of something, maybe we'll do some sort of like application form thing where people can like send their details.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And we'll do something.
Anyway, enough about how everyone else can help us for free. So you went from rent to rents into buying your own properties. You talked about refinancing stuff, adding value. Give me a typical example, because it sounds like you've done quite a lot of apartments. That's where you started, and your thing seems to be flats. And if you buy something that's not flats, you turn it into flats. So that seems to be your thing. Talk to me about how you add value, because I don't meet many people who buy apartments. I think mostly because I meet people who invest up north. They want the cheap houses. I don't meet many people who invest in London and have the property super expensive. But you buy apartments. Talk to me about, one, why you do that, and two, give me an example of how you add value to then refinance some of that money out. I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, then make sure that you click the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss any uploads. It would mean so much to me personally, and also really help us out as a channel. So I think there's a bit of a divide between the North and the South, especially in terms of the price points, right? Oh, I thought you meant the people.
No. No, in terms of price points.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
For example, up north, I think someone could do a refurb and that could add a lot of value and they could sell that property and still make good money out of it. The problem is, if you buy something down south, by the time you pay the stamp duty and the very high finance cost, even though it adds value by doing a refurb, a lot of it gets taken up because the stamp duty and the finance cost and everything else is so high. Like I bought a property once where I think it's the one across the road, the house we turned into 4 flats. From memory, I might be slightly wrong, but I think the stamp duty was like £40,000. So if you just refurb it and you sell it, because the stamp duty is so expensive, and for example, that property we bought for £600,000. Okay, now if you have bridging finance and you pay 10% for 1 year, that's £60,000. So £100,000 of your margin is already gone because of stamp duty and your finance cost, right? So if you added £150,000 because of renovation, which probably you wouldn't do because a renovation generally it doesn't add that much, a lot of it just gets taken out. So therefore, a lot of that stuff in the south, it just doesn't work because of the associated cost. So therefore, you need a way of adding value, which is going to add value beyond just doing a refurb. So when I was doing my 1 beds into 2 beds, what that means is I was buying 1-bedroom flats in London. So my criteria was I need to do a refurb as a bare minimum, but that profit margin gets taken up by the stamp duty and everything else. So I was like, I need to do a refurb and I need to add value one more way. And what is the cheapest way you can add? What is the way you can add value which costs the least amount of money and gets the highest return? In my opinion, you take a 1-bedroom flat and you turn it into a 2-bedroom flat. The reason for that is if you have a 1-bedroom flat, let's say in bad condition, and you renovate the entire property, let's say it costs you £30,000. whether the kitchen is in its existing place. Sorry, let me give you some context. You buy a 1-bedroom flat, you move the kitchen into the living room to turn that into an open plan living room, and you turn the kitchen into a bedroom. So now you have a 2-bed as opposed to a 1-bed. So when you renovate a property and you have a 1-bedroom, and let's say you don't turn into a 2-bed, and let's say it costs you £30,000, whether you turn into a 1-bed, keep it as a 1-bed or turn into a 2-bed, the renovation cost is exactly the same, because all you're doing is
still ripping out the kitchen.
Exactly.
Still putting it back
correct,
in. You're
correct.
Putting it back in a different place.
In a different room. So, if this is the living room, imagine the kitchen is on that side of the wall. I've moved it from that side of the wall to this side of the wall.
Yeah.
But that doesn't cost any more than putting a new kitchen anyway. So for now, the exact same renovation cost, I also have another bedroom, which is going to add significantly more value, because now you have a 2-bedroom property as opposed to a 1-bedroom property. So to me, it's a bit of a no-brainer, because if you're going to renovate anyway, you might as well find something which is slightly big enough where you can get another room out of it, because now you have 2 ways of adding value: the renovation and also the 2nd bedroom. So that was the rationale behind the 1-beds into 2-beds, and then from there, again, a similar thing. Bought a 3-bedroom house in pretty bad condition, but again, it's like if you buy a 3-bedroom house down south and you just paint the walls and stuff, it might go up by 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, but once you account for the renovation cost and everything else, it just doesn't leave much. So I was like, well, what is the way I can add some real value to it beyond the renovation? And that was, let's just turn them into flats.
Yeah.
And flats work well down south because of affordability reasons. Everything is so expensive. So, younger people, they can't afford houses anyway. So if you have a flat worth 250,000, 270,000, that's more affordable for younger people as opposed to a £600,000 house. That might not be the case up north, because if it's more affordable, they can just buy a house as opposed to buying flats. But it was just, how do you maximize? The way I think about it is, for every £1 you spend, you want to make as much money back. And so the 1-bed into a 2-bed is a good example of that, because you're going to spend 30,000, 20,000 anyway.
One's going to return
correct,
X, one's going to return Y, and Y is going to be significantly more.
It's the cheapest way of adding value. So I bought a 1-bedroom flat in West Hampstead for £303,000. Turned into a 2-bed. 6 months later, it was revalued at £450,000. So it went up by 150 by adding a kitchen.
I was always under the impression, and were you ever concerned that you're not, because what you can do with houses, you're not increasing square footage, you're not increasing the actual size of the property. So although you go from 1 to a 2, you've still got the same sized property. Was that ever a consideration? Do you have to think about, if there's other 2-beds in the area and they're all a bit bigger, do you have to factor in, right, okay, ours is probably going to be worth a bit less because it's a smaller property? Or can you look at it and go, no, to be fair, it's a 2-bed regardless, and this is just what they're worth? Or is there a bit of a hybrid between the two?
It's a hybrid, so you don't get quite the valuation of a 2-bed. Sometimes, like for example, my West Hampstead one, mine was 45 square meters. The comparables were like 65 square meters, so significantly bigger. So I valued it in the middle of what a 1-bed is worth and a 2-bed is worth. So it was like 1.5 times the value of a 1-bed. So it wasn't quite a 2-bed valuation, because they are smaller than 2-beds, but they're also significantly higher than 1-beds. And again, going back to the point, well, that doesn't cost you any more, but you've got another 50% in terms of the value add. So with that one, bought it for 303, refinanced at 450, just by moving a kitchen around. And so the reason I mentioned that is I spent about £25,000 on the renovation or something, right? Maybe 26, 27, I can't remember. But the point is, for every £1 you spend, so you spend 27,000, let's just say 25,000, you got 150 of uplift. So that is, for every £1, you're getting £6 of uplift.
Yeah, that's
right?
pretty good.
Whereas if you do an extension, so let's say this is a house or something. Well, I mean, it is a house, but let's say you do an extension, right?
Yeah.
You might spend £80,000 on an extension, and the property might go up by £160,000. So for £1, you've got a £2 return. It's just, I've just found that reconfiguring layouts is the cheapest way of adding value, because you're not building anything. All you're doing is finding a clever way of moving stuff around, which doesn't cost anything. Well, when I say nothing, I mean it's relatively low, but you're adding value. So for example, you look at 2-bedroom houses. So this is something people can do up north. you buy a 2-bedroom house, right? And sometimes you get like 2-bedroom houses which have like huge hallways upstairs in the landing. It's like no one needs a massive hallway. You can move stairs around and you can like rejig things. It's almost like Tetris. You're trying to make things fit. If you turn that 2-bedroom into a 3-bedroom, realistically,
You put a couple of stud walls.
yeah, put a couple stud walls. Maybe you rip the stairs out and you reposition them. It'll cost you hardly anything. It'll cost you just more than what a renovation was going to cost. But now you also have a 3rd bedroom, and that's what's significantly more. And so I just feel that if you can find a clever way of rejigging stuff and not actually building anything, that will add the most amount of value per pound spent.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, people say, well, what if I go into the loft? And I'm like, yeah, but you'll spend 50 grand going into the loft, and the house is now worth 70,000 pound more. For every £1, you've made £1.50.
Yeah.
Whereas I, for £1, made £6 because of the fact that I just rejigged stuff. It doesn't cost anything to, to like rejig it. When I went from rent to rent into buying stuff, I was like, okay, well, I want to do a development. But, developments, I don't know, that seems like a scary thing, like building stuff and
really
like,
slow.
Yeah, one is slow. And second, it just feels like, digging foundations and conversions and extensions. That's like, like a proper builder for that. And like, it feels like a big thing. Moving a kitchen from one side of the wall to the other side, you need a good plumber, and that's pretty much it. You don't need planning permission. There's no big development. It's literally just cosmetic stuff. It's literally putting a new kitchen, a new bathroom, paint some walls, lay some flooring, and you're done.
Yeah.
So mentally, it's like the easiest way for actually getting started in the development, whereas everything else is like, well, who the hell is gonna start digging ground up and build extensions and go into the loft. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying, like, when you're starting out, I definitely had that feeling, which is that stuff is way too hard, and I just need like the easiest way of making something work.
So you went from that, turning things from 1 beds into 2 beds, getting the uplift, refinancing things. You like to hold as much as you can. Have you ever sold anything? Ever sold a property?
I haven't sold anything yet, but like I said, I'm selling in the process of selling one right now. Yeah.
But now we're in something, your second kind of big conversion. You've got, literally, we can see it over there, a house you've turned into a four apartments.
4 flats, yeah.
This is going to be 5 flats.
5 flats.
What gave you the confidence to go from turning 1-bed flats into 2-bed flats into redeveloping and reconfiguring a property into 4 flats, and also not just the confidence to do a bigger project that's going to cost more money, but obviously you're jumping into things like planning permission, there's risk involved in that. What made you go from the individual units to the bigger overall freehold developments?
Yeah, so doing the 1 beds into 2 beds it doesn't take planning permission, so it's much easier. And then COVID happened, and I was like, well, maybe I want to do something, closer to home. And 1 beds into 2 beds in this area doesn't really work. There's just not that many flats in this area. So, I mean, I'm building some, but other than that, there's not that many flats here. So it's just hard.
Maybe you can convert your own 1 bed into 2 beds.
Yeah. And then I was thinking, well, what else could I do? And obviously, one thing you can do is turn houses into flats, but it requires planning permission, which is a bit of a scary thing when you're starting out, because, well, what if you don't get planning and you end up losing money? But I think it was one of those things that I thought about for a while, and I was like, ultimately, if you want to grow in property, at some point you're going to have to get planning permission. Like you're just going to have to. Unless you stick to the single units and you just do one thing at a time, you will have to get planning permission at some stage. So the decision for me was, I can either stick to doing small things for the rest of my life, or just take a bit of a punt.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I had the confidence to do it. It was more so just accepting that, well, like, what's the alternative here? Like, am I just going to keep doing this?
Stagnate.
Like, am I just going to do this for the rest of time and never take a risk? And it definitely wasn't like, I didn't feel confident that I didn't think I was going to get planning, in the sense that I knew technically I should get planning because I'd done all the research, but until it actually happens for the first time, you don't quite believe it. So yeah, to me the decision was, am I just going to do this for the rest of my life? Like, am I just going to keep doing the smaller stuff, or am I going to take a chance on something bigger? And I think it's the same thing for a lot of people when they're making that transition to starting a side hustle or side business, right? Which is, well, am I just going to have this job for the rest of my life, or am I going to attempt something? And you're never quite confident that it's going to work. It's just more so you kind of realize, well, there's no real alternative, you know.
The other option is you stay still.
Correct.
And if you're not happy staying still.
So I just wanted to do something bigger. And then I did a house into 2 flats. And the good thing with the house into 2 flats was there was hardly anything structural. We knocked one wall out and that was pretty much it. Everything else, I actually got a handyman to do the house into 2 flats. It wasn't even a builder. I just got a handyman, of course, certified electrician and plumber, but I didn't need a builder for that because it was all, again, cosmetic. Painting, flooring, that kind of stuff. Even soundproofing, you know, like soundproofing, things like soundproofing, people make it sound like it's the hardest thing in the world. It's actually really easy. Yeah. So like, honestly, it's like the easiest shit.
Yeah.
And so I had a quote from a company for £12,000 for soundproofing, right? To do like the designs and everything else. I then got another company who made a design for £500. By the way, the £12,000, they would do everything, like installation and everything. Yeah. Went to another company, got a £500 quote for the soundproofing. It was literally, not a quote, but like a design.
Yeah.
And it breaks down, well, have your flooring and then have this material and then this material and then this material. And then same with like the ceiling, right? I bought all this stuff for £2,000, £500 for the design. Yeah. Got my handyman to drill everything into the wall and it passed.
Yeah.
And it cost me £2,500 as opposed to £12,000. Yeah. So like nothing was that hard.
Soundproofing, you can cost an absolute fortune if you go to a company that's going to do it all.
Because they make it seem like it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's literally, you just lay some underlay and like staple some stuff on top and you're pretty much done. And so, but the good thing was that was 2 flats, didn't require anything structural. Then I did the house into 4 flats. And the only real structural thing was we had a tiny side extension. So on the house, like on the right on the back, there's a bit of a side extension. So I went from doing a 1 into 2, which required like nothing structural, to a house into 2 flats, which required 1 structural thing, which was knocking the wall down, to a house into 4 flats, which again required 1 structural thing, which was a bit of a side extension. And then this one, it requires a bigger side extension. So what I say to people normally is that I think whenever you learn anything, there's a diminishing curve in terms of learning. Whether you do a 1 bed into a 2 bed or you turn a house into 5 flats or 9 flats, it's not that 9 flats is so much harder. It's like marginally harder because, you know, if you're an accountant or a doctor, a dentist, whatever, you'll learn the most in the first couple of years, and then after that you're getting slightly better. A doctor with 1 year of experience compared to 10 years of experience, the person with 10 years doesn't know 10 times as much. They might know twice as much or 2.5 times as much. So when you do a 1 bed into a 2 bed, you get like 85% of the learning curve because the finance is the same, the legal process is the same, the way you do the floor plan is the same, the comparable is the same, the GDV is the same, the stress testing is the same. When you go from 1 into a 2, let's say you get 85% of the curve. Then you go into a house into 2 flats. The only additional thing you need to learn is how to get planning permission. When you go from 2 flats to 4 flats, the only additional thing is, well, now I have to do a side extension. When you go from 4 flats to 5 flats, that side extension becomes a slightly bigger side extension. And then when you go to 9 flats, it becomes an even larger side extension. But it's like, it's incremental. It's not like it's getting 10 times harder or 20 times harder. But you have to do the easier stuff in order to progress onto the harder stuff.
So you're talking about doing another one where you want to get 9 flats.
I offered it one, it got rejected, but yeah.
When you're talking about growing incrementally, what stops you just going for 20 flats?
What stops you is I just don't think I could do 20 flats.
Why?
Because I think what happens is with humans, when you achieve a tiny bit of success, it gives you a bit more confidence. And then you achieve slightly bigger success and it gives you a bit more confidence. And then you achieve that and it gives you a bit more confidence. So right now, I have the confidence to do 9, but I don't have the confidence to do 20. And I think once I do 9, in my head, I'll be like, well, maybe I can do 15. And once I've done 15, I'll think maybe I can do 25. Whereas no one can really, like for example, maybe 20, maybe 20, maybe I could do, but I'm like on the brink of it, like, maybe not. Whereas 9, I feel like very comfortable with 9. Because I'm like, well, if I've done 5, why can't I do 9? The reason I don't like the strategy of 1 or 20, 1 or 30, 1 or 40, because if you extrapolate enough, then why doesn't everyone think we can just be Elon Musk? Because technically, if you keep extrapolating that 1 or 20, 1 or 50, 1 or 100, I think you end up shooting yourself in the foot because you convince yourself, well, I need to believe I can do the biggest thing in the world. Whereas I sometimes think pessimism is actually better than optimism, because if you go, well, okay, I can't do 20, but maybe I can do 6, right? You'll actually end up doing 6, and that will give you the confidence to do 8, which will give you the confidence to do 12. and you'll actually make progress. Whereas back in the day, I used to think, well, I need to do something massive. Like everyone else is doing something huge. And if I just, visualize, I can do something big as well. And what happens is the bigger you think, you also create a lot more pressure at the same time, because you're thinking, well, I need to do something big. I need to do something massive. In reality, anyone who's done something massive, they've done a shit ton of smaller stuff, which has led them to do something massive.
Yeah.
And so right now, I like my pessimism approach, which is, I don't think I can do anything big. Maybe I can do 6, or maybe I can do 7. But I know once I've done 7, it will allow me to do 8, which will allow me to do 12, 18, 16.
Ahmed, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I think it's been I've loved coming around looking at your old grandma house. There's going to be flats. I'm really excited to see what this looks like. I'm excited to see you do your 9-bedder and your 20-bedder as and when it comes along.
One at a time.
Yeah. I think we said before it'd be good to do another
after one,
so we can see the before and after of this property. Obviously, the house tour is going to come out in another video, so if anyone's listening and they want to watch that'll be on YouTube as well. But when we come and do the after, maybe we can jump on and do another podcast to expand a little bit more into ins and outs of the planning and all that stuff. But honestly, this has been so valuable. I really appreciate it.
It's been great for me as well.
Perfect. So where can people find you?
YouTube, which is going to be the best place, so maybe you can link in the description. I've got a YouTube channel, my website, ahmed-khan.com. So those probably are the 2 best places if you want to see more content.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast
Thanks.
again.
Thanks for having me.
It's been good.
Brilliant.
If you enjoyed the show, then make sure that you click the subscribe button and also hit the bell notification so you don't miss an upload. We're on YouTube, but we're also on all podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts.